Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me. I am down here in the chat. If you want to, if you've never used this before, you can click up in the upper right hand corner and also open up the chat area instead of just watching the video. You can watch the video and chat at the same time. I'm actually going to be videoing it on a different computer, and so I'm going to be about 30 seconds behind on that computer, and I'm going to turn off my microphone on this one, and then whenever we're done and we have the discussion, I'm going to come back to my Discord server. This is the only way I can do it without crashing my system like I've done before, but that's the way we're going to get it going, get started. You guys got any questions? Welcome. It's nice to see you. You guys got any questions about anything on Discord? You can unmute your microphone and talk, or you can just type it in the chat. Like I said, in the upper right-hand corner, you can open up the chat window. It's good to see you. Yeah, see, it's coming up. See, that's the late delay. That's coming from my other microphone. Sorry. Can you all hear me? If you can, type in the chat at least. Good deal. I'm going to turn off my microphone here and get started. Like I said, it'll take about 30 seconds before we get going. And if you have any, the discussion will have to come through the chat while I'm teaching if you have any questions. I'll periodically look over at the chat and see if you have any questions, and then we'll have voice discussion and video discussion afterwards. If you want, you can do voice or video or both. Hey, John. All right, put this on mute. That's the late delay. That's coming from my other microphone. Sorry. Can you all hear me? If you can, type in the chat at least. Good deal. Okay, welcome to the course. I am Michael Patton, and this is Of First Importance. No, let me start over. Hold on just a second. My deal is not open. My Stream Deck to where I can switch the slides. Stream Deck. Okay, basic. Switch. Forgot to light my candles. Now I'm not going to have that nice flickering in the background. Oh well, it's good. Let's get started. Let me pray. Thank you, Father, for this time. Lord, I'm really excited about this class. You know how long I've thought about doing a class like this and how important it is to me to try to do this and do this well. I pray that you would help me as I teach, help the students as they learn, help there to be accuracy, integrity. Let us stay faithful to you and let us be gracious at the same time. That's such a hard thing whenever we're talking about this to find the balance in between. And we go to either direction so often. So just guide us during this entire course. Guide me in the continued development of it, and guide the students in their learning of it. Let us just have a great time. In Christ's name, amen. All right, Michael Patton. I am Michael Patton, and we are teaching Of First Importance. This is a course of a comprehensive exploration of the essentials and non-essentials of the Christian faith. Now, this is this course. It's really funny. You might think that there's a lot of stuff out there on this particular subject because it's such a big deal right now. It's such an important thing right now to talk about what things are the essentials and what things are not the essentials in the Christian faith. And a lot of there's a lot of stuff written that have to do with just here is an exploration of the essentials. Let me teach through the essentials. I mean, heck, my book Now That I'm a Christian goes through this and goes through the 5 most essential doctrines and the 5 most essential practices of the Christian faith. But I don't go through and explore how I got there, why it is that I believe these are the 5 most important doctrines, why it is I believe these are the 5 most important practices, and how in the world would I come to this? Is it an arbitrary thing that I just thought up on my own, that these are the most important because they're the most important to me? Or is it because they're the most important to my tradition, or just the way I've grown up? My mom and dad thought they were the most important, so these are the most important. There's not really too much out there. As I build my bibliography on this, and I'll continue to share with you my bibliography, and hopefully at the end have a more extensive one and have the essentials of the bibliography and things that are kind of supplementary to it. But there's not really too much out there, especially by way of books that deal with this in any comprehensive manner, or any halfway, I don't want to say academic, but just in-depth, a very in-depth way of looking at it. Now, you can find stuff that has to do with the development of Christian doctrine in church history. I think of John Henry Newman's essays on the development of Christian doctrine, which is a huge tome of a book. It's written by a Roman Catholic, but it's a very interesting book, and it's a very good book if you wanted to dive into something that is so extensive and very hard to read. It's 19th century, but it actually is a really good book on the development of doctrine in history. But that's not all we're dealing with it as. And when we talk about the Roman Catholic Church, you're talking about something that is far more complicated and far more extensive than what I believe it needs to be, and certainly more extensive than what we're going to do here, because we don't have all the canon law and the years and years of development that we have to justify all of the development that we've gone through and kind of canonize it in some way, dogmatize it in some way. But we are going to go through this in a very extensive way from a biblical perspective and a historical perspective, and just really a philosophical perspective as well, trying to build a methodology that we can trust. And I hope by the end of this class, you guys see the rhyme and reason that that I have come to, as far as these are the principles, these are the things to look for. This is the way you can tell something's an essential, and this is the way you can tell something's not an essential. I think, of course, the Bible is our primary source, but history is a secondary source that you will find, and I'll make the contention, that is just as relevant as far as backing up the Bible. If you have something in the Bible but nothing in all of history, then I say it is going to be disqualified. But we'll get to that later on. So let's start with the Apostle Paul. He says, for what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. Just in case you wanted to know where I got of first importance, it's from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I think this is verse 3, where Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and he's getting ready to tell them, here's the gospel, and lay it out. The popular passage in the Corinthians, where Paul gives the gospel and tells the gospel and begins his exhortation on the importance of the resurrection. But he says, I gave to you that which was of first importance. And we'll dive into that passage more later on. Also, you have a creed. This is sometimes thought of as the evangelical creed. or the evangelical credo, if you wanted to say what is the creed of the evangelical church, or what is the distinctive, what makes the evangelical church different, I would say this is very important to understand. This phrase, in essentials unity, in non-essentials liberty, and in all things charity. Right? If you ever came over to the Credo House in Edmond, Oklahoma, the theological coffee shop that I had, our headquarters, right when you walk in the door, way high up, written in Latin, was this phrase. Because I wanted people on the tour to understand how important this is, how important this phrase is whenever you're walking into the environment of the Credo House. And whenever you're walking in, at least historically, whenever you're walking into the environment of evangelicalism as compared to other traditions and other traditions within Protestantism, this has always been something that at least we have aspired to whenever we have attempted to know our own history. Now, I got here source undisclosed because I want to talk about that. I'll actually spend quite a bit of time going through the history of this phrase and other phrases like it. And I bet you, maybe some of you have dug deep enough to see who this is actually from. But I'll give you a hint: it's not St. Augustine, and it's not Philip Melanchthon. So that's as far as I'm going to go with it right now. I think we do know who it was said by, or at least the earliest that we have it. This is the chart that you may have seen before. If you've been through the theology program, you saw something like this. I've developed it a little bit more since then. I'll probably keep on developing it some here and there. But as you can see, this is kind of the paradigm. This is, everything in this class is basically going to go to justify what I've got here, that there are essentials and non-essentials and how they're categorized, and then to try by the end of the class to fill in at least the center portion along with much of the second and third portions, the second and third circles. So this concentric circle, the idea is the closer you get to the center, the more important it is. And the further away you get from the center, the less important it is. Okay, so here's the outline for the course. This is a tentative outline. Please just understand that this is in development, but and I may change it even next week. But I think next week is going to be what it says there. But this is I've kind of pulled everything together and said, all right, here's what I'm going to try to do, and then as I develop it, we'll see how it goes. But the introduction to the essentials and the non-essentials tonight, and then next week the development of maximalism, then this uncertainty of certainty, creeds in the Bible, creeds in church history, a proposed criteria for distinguishing between the essentials and the non-essentials. That's where we get to really the heart of what I'm proposing here. We've got to go through other things first, and then we'll start filling it in. We'll start talking about the essentials part 1, the essentials part 2, and then we're going to have to get into something called the essentials of the essentials, which is quite a bit of fun, which is new. I haven't taught on that before. And then the application and mission. What does this look like in our lives? Here's the student. Here's the course student. The outline. I can't go through. Okay, it'll just have to show it all at once. All of these it'll have to show it all at once because I've had to do this very, very differently than I normally do it to make it work with all the programs I've got running at once. But the student will be able to understand the importance of distinguishing between essentials and non-essential, essential and non-essential. Got to correct that. Trace the historical origin for the maxim in essentials unity, what I just talked about earlier. Develop their own unique conceptual chart of distinguishing between the essentials and the non-essentials. By the end of the class, what I want you to have done is I want you to have made a chart for yourself. I'm not saying it's all relative. That's not what I'm trying to do with that. But I am saying that you are going to have to fill it in on your own. And my chart is not necessarily the right chart. I hope when we're talking about the first 2 center circles that we're all in agreement, or we're very close to agreement, especially within the center one. But I'm not saying I'm necessarily, this is gospel, what I'm presenting to you as the, well, I forgot to turn on my light here. There we go. Maybe that'll help some. Grow in your understanding of biblical development of doctrine or progressive revelation. Defend the concept of distinguishing between essentials and non-essentials, basically saying, why this course? Defend the need for this type of teaching. I think this teaching is part of prolegomena, which is basically the first things, which is basically whenever you're talking about the Christian theology, I think this is one of the very first things that we ought to have to understood. I mean, of course, we have faith-seeking understanding. We are believers seeking to understand that which we believe, and so we come to a trust in Christ, and I think this is one of the very first things that we begin to understand, or we have to understand in theology, that there is the importance of distinguishing between essentials and non-essential items, and developing a chart, a conceptual chart like this. I wish I would have done this very early on in my life. I wish somebody would have taught me this, because basically I may be like you and so many others. Whenever you're very, very committed, once you turn yourself over to the Lord and you decide, hey, I'm going to follow you with all my heart and all of my soul and all of my guts, you think the more you place in that center circle, the more essentials you have, the better off you are. Like you're taking it more seriously. That's the idea. I wish somebody would have taught me that's not necessarily true, or it's not true at all. Defend the concept of distinguishing between essentials and non-essentials. Understand the objections to this concept. How do people object? How would Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox object to this concept? Or at least to my chart? How would fundamentalists object to this? How would different denominations object? There are people that would say, hey, this is not the right thing. I mean, this type of thing that Michael is teaching you is heresy. There are not essentials and non-essentials, because God doesn't speak with a lisp. He doesn't speak unclearly, and he doesn't speak unauthoritatively. So therefore, everything he says in the Bible is the absolute essential, and they are all equally essential because they are all equally inspired. Understand the relevance of this concept in every area of life, and it does. I mean, it's not just here. You will be able to find applications for this everywhere. You can apply this to your job, to your marriage, to building a car, to driving down the road. I mean, we either implicitly or explicitly function in our lives on the understanding that there are essentials and non-essentials. Why not just the same within our spiritual life in Christianity? Develop your own unique conceptual chart, as I talked about, distinguishing between the essentials and non-essentials. Okay, so let's start with the introduction of the non-essentials. If there's not any question, I can't really say, is there any questions? I can look back, for a couple minutes ago and see what you guys have said, but I'm a little bit late on that, so I can't say, are there any questions? Then let's pause for the next minute or two while the Discord catches up. Or actually, it's YouTube that has to catch up. So let's get started here. Let me first talk about this, and you've heard me talk about stuff like this before probably, but this is so important whenever we're entering into this study, to understand where we are all at, to understand the types of presuppositions we bring to the table, and how important it is for us to, in these studies, as we enter these studies, to hang our theology on the door, our theological coat by the door, and pick it up whenever we leave. Try our best to set aside our presuppositions, our passions that may be right or may be wrong, but we've got to learn, because we have got to introduce the possibility of being wrong. If you don't have the possibility of if you don't start these things with the possibility that you may be wrong, then don't even bother coming, because there's no such thing as learning outside of that assumption. If you are coming to hear us confirm our prejudice, or me confirm your prejudice, then you're not here to learn. And so whenever we talk about this, we've got to talk about what we have coming to the table, what we are. Maybe this is the first theological class you're taking. Maybe it's not, but maybe you've never even heard of this concept before. But there's a concept out there called belief perseverance. And belief perseverance is the tendency for someone to cling to one's initial beliefs even in the face of contradictory evidence or arguments. This is just a belief of the will in the sense of a stubborn will, a will that has been preconditioned, a will that is genetic, a will that you have because your parents had it. You want to believe the same thing that you believed whenever you first heard about whatever it is that you believe, because that's what you've always believed, and it's the easiest to hold on to. We are traditionalists by nature. Just about all of us are. It's just the most comfortable way to go. We don't like to be wrong. We don't like to move in with the presupposition that we might be wrong. We want to move in with the presupposition that our presuppositions are going to be presupposed. So you've got this related to what's called confirmation bias, when someone selectively seeks out and interprets information in a way that confirms their existing beliefs while ignoring and dismissing contradictory evidence. Examples of this in politics, you've got, handouts help, handouts hurt. Whichever side of the political spectrum you come in on, it's hard for us to really engage and think that we may be wrong on one of these. Conspiracy theories, the earth is flat. Maybe you've thought that your whole life. Another example of belief perseverance is personal identity. I am fat. My dad told me whenever I was young, I am stupid. Those types of things, and they stick with you. Well, in theology, we have the same type of thing. It's just what beliefs we have always held on to, the ones that have given us the most comfort, the ones that, were really important to us at one time, and we don't want to let those go. It's the same thing whenever we're talking about what beliefs are the most important and which ones, as we go on this concentric circle, which ones are less important. And you probably already have your chart. In your mind, you've got a chart already made out. And I do want you to do that if you will. If you get a chance tonight, kind of draw out the circle. We'll look at the concentric circle again in just a moment. But draw it out and at least fill in the first two, what is essential for salvation. I'll show you another chart also, and I want you to fill out some of it as well. And then see how that develops as we go. But most of us have our minds somewhat made up on this. We know which things are the most essential and which things aren't the most essential. And you may say, I know what the most essential are. The most essential are, the Jesus Christ died on the cross, and then he rose from the grave, and the Bible is inspired, and the Bible is inerrant, and six-day creation, and on and on we go. Premillennialism, that kind of stuff. Just fill it out the best you can. What are the essentials for salvation? What are essentials for orthodoxy? But our folk theology is part of our belief perseverance. Folk theology is, again, that theology that has just been handed down to us, we've had for so long, that it just has become a part of us. It doesn't necessarily make it wrong if it's folk theology. It just makes it wrong in the sense of how we have adopted it. And so our chart may not be wrong, but the way you've adopted it may have been wrong. And it's just we adopt it. How do we adopt things? We adopt them because we've always had it. If you believe something and the main reason you believe it is because you've always believed it, or because your family's believed it, or because mom and dad taught you it, then that is not a right methodology. It's good theology for all the wrong reasons, kind of. Like my theology professor used to tell me, my historic theology professor used to tell us students, he's going to teach us all kinds of great things, but we're just going to end up believing what mom and dad told us when we were young. He was talking about belief perseverance. And as you can see, we've got a lot of folk theology that a lot of people hold on to: guardian angels, works-based salvation, heaven is timeless or without time, where two or three are gathered in my name is a prayer, is about prayer. All sins are equal in the sight of God. These are things that I find very common in the evangelical church, or just in the church in general, that are part of the evangelical folk theology or Christian folk theology. And these particular ones I believe are wrong. No need to get into them. It's not part of our class, but it's just something, just to jar ourselves, to break ourselves free from our current thinking. Just be ready for that. You may break yourself free from your current thinking only to come back to it at the end, and that's just fine. If you rebuild your theology, if we deconstruct it and rebuild it and it's the same, you can't be anything but stronger after you have rebuilt it. So that's what we're continually doing in theology. We're deconstructing what we know and reconstructing it, and more we just hopefully it gets stronger and more correct. And sometimes it takes drastic changes in order for the correctness to come about. Okay, here let me tell you the best religious joke ever. And now that's not my words, the best religious joke. This was actually rated the funniest religious joke of all time by Guardian magazine. It is by Emo Phillips. You probably didn't even know this was by Emo Phillips. And you've probably heard this before, but it's worth telling again, at least in its original form, because it's so much fun. It says, I once saw a guy on a bridge about to jump. I said, don't do it. He said, nobody loves me. I said, God loves you. Do you believe in God? He said, yes. And I said, me too. Then I asked, are you a Christian or a Jew? He said, I'm a Christian. He said, I said, me too. Protestant or Catholic? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. What denomination? He said, Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist? He said, Northern Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist of Great Lakes region or Northern Conservative Baptist of Eastern region? And he said, let's see here. Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region. Okay, wait. Sorry. Of Conservative Baptist region or the Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region? He said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region. I said, me too. Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region Council of 1879 or Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region Council of 1912. And he said, Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region of 1912. I said, die heretic, and I pushed him over. So you can see how much that applies to what we're talking about and how important it is, because you can agree upon so many things and get excited about. Me too. Come with me. Let's fellowship together. We've got so much in common. And then you get all the way down to one of these things that are so peripheral that just don't matter. 1912 or 1879. Well, you're off. So you're worthy to die. That's kind of the idea here. A great joke. Great joke. Okay, let's talk about this. Let me ask this question. I can't ask it and get feedback right now because like I said, I'm on a lag. But what are the essentials of a wedding ceremony? I have a love-hate relationship with wedding ceremonies. I've done lots and lots and lots of weddings. I used to be a singles pastor for a long time, and I did so many there. And I'm the type of teacher that and whenever I teach, I'm more give me an outline and let me just kind of go with it from there. I don't want particular, exact things that I have to. I don't manuscript. Dallas Theological Seminary, they made us manuscript our sermons. I could not stand that. I mean, that just drove me insane. I just want a basic outline, and I'll take it. But with the wedding ceremony, I get really, really nervous. I love doing wedding ceremonies, don't get me wrong. I love doing it because it's such a particularly special part of people's lives. And just to be there for them at that time of their life. Same thing with funerals as well. I mean, it's a little bit different, but the same thing of being there with the family and being there for the family. And just doing somebody's wedding and always being that person who married them. I love it. I love whenever you present the bride and the groom to the crowd, and it's just an exciting thing, wedding ceremonies. But I also can't stand them because you have to get everything right, and I get really scared about getting everything perfectly right, especially people's names. I mean, I kid you not, I swear to God, you're not going to believe me, but I did. My sister and her husband, whenever they married, I wrote both their names first middle, and last names on my arm because I was nervous about getting it wrong. That yeah, I can go so blank-minded whenever I have to be formal and exact. So that's kind of the thing that gets me going. That gets me scared. Whenever I'm doing wedding ceremonies, that or whenever I'm doing wedding counseling beforehand, I'm talking to them about their wedding. What is involved in a wedding ceremony? A lot of times, people get coordinators, but oftentimes they'll ask me first. And many times I've been a coordinator as well for some smaller weddings. They say, "Well, what are we supposed to do? What? Tell us what it is that we have to do for a wedding ceremony." One of the things I love to tell them is, here's what has to go into a wedding ceremony. Now, a lot of times, here's kind of a list I made out of many of the things that could be essentials. What are the essentials of a wedding ceremony? What are those things that if I left these things out, these people would not be married. So you cannot leave this out. Whenever I'm telling them, I say, okay, here's the thing you really got to make sure you have. Here's a list. And just think about it. What are the essentials? Is a church essential for a wedding ceremony? Or a wedding to be a wedding? For somebody to be married at the end, actually married. I'm not talking about what's the essential for a marriage. That's a different question. But what's essential for a marriage ceremony in order for someone to actually be wed at the end? Is a church? Is a wedding dress? How about a bridesmaid? How about a crowd? A unity candle? Vows? Or is it the traditional vows? I mean, I go through all kinds of different things. Do you have the vows? Do you have the traditional? What about a ring? What about the ring vows? What if you left the ring out? What if you left the ring vows out? What about a preacher or officiant? What about an ordained preacher? Do you have to, not only do you have to have a preacher, do you have to have an ordained preacher? Or how about this? Do you have to have an ordained Christian preacher in order for a wedding to be a wedding? How about this one? Probably get some of you stumped here. How about a wedding license? Got to have a wedding license, right? How about two people getting married? I just read yesterday, send it off to my family, about a whole group of people. I think there were 6 of them that was in the text that I sent that married themselves. Did that work? If I was officiating that, would I be able to say, you're married now? Okay, 2 people getting married. Does it have to be a man and a woman? Of course, this is a big deal today, right? Does it have to be a man or a woman? How about a song? Do you have to sing a song? How about a wedding witness signature? Does somebody have to sign the marriage certificate? Best man. How about a pronouncement at the end? How about the kiss? Whenever I say, my favorite part is whenever I say, you may kiss the bride. Then my second favorite part is pronouncing. My favorite part is you may kiss the bride. But because it means I've gotten through it without, if I've messed up or not messed up, it's over. But you may kiss the bride. Does there have to be a kiss? What if we forgot? Oh my gosh, I forgot to have him kissed. I forgot to say you kissed the bride. I need to call them and have them come back, or at least call them and say you may kiss the bride type thing. What are the things that go into it? And this is whenever I'm talking to people about their wedding ceremony, and they get well, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? Do we need to have this? Do we need to have unity candle? I saw somebody do this. So are we supposed to do that? I say, listen, here's the deal. Whenever it comes down to it, and I've taught a mini credo course on this. It was 4 sessions, but a mini credo course on the history of marriage, the history of how it is that weddings have been. It's been a long time since I did that, but what stands out to me is what is essential. Did you know that it wasn't until, I think it was I could be off a little bit, but I think it was 1916 that's whenever America, the government, finally, for the first time, the federal government got in on marriages, but before that, they were not involved at all. I think that's pretty interesting. How did people get married before that? Because one of the first things people think is, well, the most important thing is for us to get our wedding certificate. I say, yeah, I mean, you need to, as far as being in America, but even in America, we got common law marriages. I've married people I've told people that have been living together for a long time and meet the criteria. Well, you don't really have to have any type of ceremony. You don't have to go and get married at the courthouse. You don't have to have a marriage certificate. I think it's better that you do for various reasons, but you don't have to in order to really be married. That is not a criteria. I think it's kind of one of those ones that is very important, but not essential for a wedding. You don't have to have me. I mean, historically speaking, you don't have to have me. Let me tell you the two things. If you go down through all of history, now I can go in the Bible and tell you what is required in the Bible. The Bible doesn't have any requirements for the wedding ceremony. It doesn't have any ways to tell you, here's what you are to, here's how you get married. I mean, even with Adam and Eve, it doesn't have this. It's interesting. Go through it throughout the entire Bible, and you will not find criteria on what makes a man and a woman wed on their ceremony, how to conduct a ceremony. There's nothing that tells me how to conduct a ceremony. But I will tell you this, that it does require two people. It does require a man and a woman. Now, take that from the Bible, and then you are able to grab a couple other things, and they're kind of implied, but let me find these throughout all of history. Throughout all of history, going before the Bible to the Egyptian culture, to the Greek culture, the Assyrian culture, all the way up through the Christian church, what you have are some common denominators. The least common denominators are these. Number one, you have to together, it could be just you two. Back in the Middle Ages, it used to be just two people coming together and saying, I marry you, and the other person would say, I marry you. That was it, together. Those were the wedding vows, but they were making some type of commitment that was a marriage commitment. They knew it was a marriage commitment, that they knew that they were being bound together as husband and wife by this commitment. That was number one. But that alone wouldn't marry you. There was one other thing, only one other thing. Can you think of what that might be? Wasn't the wedding ring, but it has to do with the wedding ring. Wasn't taking the man's name, but it has to do with taking the man's name. So you see, you can't get married in secret and never tell anybody. Then you wouldn't be married. If you got married in secret, you could get married in secret and sign the certificate from the government. But if you never tell anybody in the public, from a historical standpoint, you're not married. The reason being is because there is a public proclamation to other people that you have made a commitment to this person. This has to do with, not only would you not be keeping it secret for the sake of, hey, let's don't tell anybody just in case this doesn't work out. You tell people because that is part of the commitment of telling people. The commitment it doesn't come into be whenever you have sex on the wedding night, as some people have thought and throughout history have thought as well, especially in the late Middle Ages. But it is whenever you proclaim to other people that you are married. So those two things have to come into be. And outside of that, I tell them, you can do just about anything else you want. Plan the wedding however you want, wherever you want. Have fun with it. Don't get too scared about it. The rest is pomp and circumstance for you. But those two things, if you don't have these things, if you don't have the vow, you can write your own vows as long as they have to do with I'm marrying you and we're going to be together forever type thing. That's all I require in the vows, and there needs to be some type of public proclamation. We don't have to have a big crowd, don't even have to have a crowd, but afterwards you have to go out there and tell other people you're married. Wearing a wedding ring's fine, taking the name of the other is fine as well, as long as you're telling everybody about it. But to keep it secret, you're not really getting married. I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because you got the most essential, and I think it has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about later, and with the salvation, because I think it's very close. Even the Bible illustrates our becoming Christians as our marriage to Christ and our commitment to Christ, our proclamation to Him of a commitment. And then what does it say? Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and that has a public proclamation, a public ceremony. Baptism is a public proclamation. going out and telling everybody, confessing with your mouth to other people before men is very important in the Bible. But that is part of it. And then the rest, we build on from out from there. But I think it's a good template, because we often ask, what's the difference between getting married and what is essential for a marriage? So I would say, well, these two things are essential for the wedding to be married, in order to be married in the end. But the wedding, I mean, whenever you're talking about the marriage, there's all kinds of things, and it gets a little bit more dicey, because this has to do with your practice and your personalities and coming together, and what's the most important thing for you guys. And you might say conversation, you might say sexual intimacy. There's all kinds of things you can put in there, but it's not as objective as what we're talking about right there. So I think it's a good illustration. You can talk about that with regard to just about anything. What's essential for driving down the road? Keeping your hands on the wheel, or at least a hand on the wheel, keeping your eyes in front of you, checking the mirrors. What's essential for a car? A car has to have 4 wheels. It has to have a steering wheel. It has to have an engine. What is non-essential for it? Well, it doesn't have to have, leather seats. It doesn't have to have automatic windows. It doesn't have to have a auxiliary cord for your stereo. It doesn't even have to have a stereo. Those types of things become less and less essential. I would say having a stereo is very important, but not essential. I would also say having an auxiliary cord at least is very important, but not essential. But my car right now doesn't have either one of those that works. Excuse me. Okay. So like I said, you can apply it to all kinds of areas, different areas. So why should we study this issue? Well, there's a few reasons. To understand what hills are worth dying on. This is what we want to leave here with. I mean, what a terrible thing whenever we become Christians and we fight and fight and fight, but we end up fighting for things that don't really matter, that we find out later on aren't very important, that we're not hills worth dying on. Who wants to die on a hill that is not worth dying on? I want to die on the hill that is the most important, and I don't want to die on a hill that I shouldn't even be so certain about, that I'm not so certain about, that I could be very wrong about. To understand what unites us all as Christians, I'll give a list of all the things. I think it's very important for us to look and see the incredible amount of doctrine that unites all Christians of all denominations, of all traditions. And then we'll see those things that we divide over, which I think the things that we divide over are much, much less than the things that unite us. I think we unite around more things. I think it'll surprise you. To understand the wrestling match God wants us to have with our doctrine, God does not provide in the Bible, outside of a few places, we'll look at them, but He doesn't provide in the Bible this chart filled out. I would have liked for Him to. No, I wouldn't have. I mean, joking around, yeah, I say I would have liked for Him to. That'd make it a lot easier. But I like the wrestling match. I think it's important for us. I know that this is going to sound odd, but disunity in some of these areas creates a need for us to dig deeper and wrestle with these doctrines more. I think even in the Bible, some of the things are less clear, because God wants us to dig deeper in so many different ways, through prayer, through our rationality, through more biblical study, through more systematic study, through just wrestling with doctrines. Because when you wrestle with things, they are more important to you at the end, and they grow deeper into your heart than if you're just told and you check off the box, okay, that's what I believe. So many of the things that we really do wrestle with, and it's important for us to have this wrestling match. To understand the difference between the three great traditions, I want you to understand the difference between Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodoxy with regard to this. Um, like I said, they're very different approaches whenever it comes to how do we define the essentials and non-essentials. And very interesting too. I think ours is the whenever you're talking about Protestants, it is it requires the biggest wrestling match personally with the Bible, with history, with rationality, with creation, that kind of thing, because we're the ones who have the smallest list, or normally we have the smallest list of things that are kind of dogmatized that we are supposed to believe in order to be Protestants, and especially evangelical Protestants, and to understand the difference among the Protestant denominations. Okay, so focusing on other issues can limit your influence. Now, I've got some examples here of people that I believe, at least for me, I don't want to. I mean, I know by saying this, I am stepping on some people's toes that are listed here. Some people that I really respect too, but I think that these people here have focused publicly on some things, kind of put it in their center circle, revealing themselves to be so passionately tempered towards certain things and so divisive that it has really affected their influence, really affected their ability to reach other people and ostracize them and cause them to get smaller and smaller circles that they can have influence in. So let's talk about Tremper Longman and his politics. Tremper Longman, he, if you are friends with him on Facebook, he's a great scholar. Gosh, I had him teach Old Testament theology for the Credo House because of his scholarship and because, generally speaking, he is very, very balanced. At least whenever it comes to theology and stuff. But recently, like some of us do as we get older and older, unfortunately, this is sometimes the way we go, and I've seen a lot of scholars go this way. They're very balanced in their middle ages, but then whenever they get older, they get just very tight, very angry, very divisive in so many things. But Tremper Longman seems to have gotten that way with his politics. I mean, he is just just about every other thing he posts on Facebook is not about Christ, not about the Old Testament, not about, wrestling with the issues, but about some political issue. And I don't mind talking about politics. I think we need to some. I mean, I kind of make it as a rule myself to try to go, not only whenever I'm writing something that's political, be very, very careful with what I write, but, only write something political out of every 10 things that I write. 10 issues about the Bible, about theology, about God, about Christ, and then maybe one political issue. Well, you got to decide what things are political. I don't think some of the things that are stated as political today are so much political, especially things having to do with biblical anthropology. But Rob Bell, The Existence of Hell, he's known for that. What do you know Rob Bell for? The existence of hell. He does not believe in hell. He believes that in universalism, everybody's going to get saved. You see, they focus on these things so much that that's what they become known for. John Hagee, he's known for prophecy. Ken Ham, he's known just for being a six-day creationist. James White, I'm a Calvinist, but, James White is just known for his Calvinism, and that's what he focuses on. I don't mind people having areas of influence where this is where they speak to more, but you got to be real careful and be very kind and balanced, and especially on the issues that are not central to the Christian faith, that you are reaching your hand out, building bridges at the same time as, and placing your area that you focus on in the right place. I remember Ken Ham one time wrote a post about me whenever I wrote a blog that basically said that I said that 6-day creationism is not the gospel and we need to quit acting like it is. And he responded to it and was really, just kind of, he didn't like it much at all, basically, that I would say that it's not part of the gospel. And that was his idea, was that it is part of the gospel. If you lose 6-day creation, you lose the gospel. And I think that's very, very problematic. I don't really want to get into that specifically, but that's what these people are known for. And we don't want to be known for those secondary issues or tertiary issues that are farther and further out there on the periphery of what is important. Here is a story. This is called. This is from Standing Fast. It's a book on reaching our culture today, and it's not so much a theology book, but I found this to be just really good and perfect for what we're talking about here tonight. It's under a section called Know Your Essentials. Written by, it's called Standing Fast Ministry in an Unfriendly World by Ed Dobson. It says, we gain a hearing with a secular audience when we don't confuse essentials and non-essentials. One summer night, we held our Saturday night service downtown outdoors. We had just started when a ruckus broke out at the back of the crowd. It turned out to be a group of angry Christians staging a protest. They hoisted signs proclaiming that Christian rock music was of the devil. They became so disruptive, the on-duty police patrolling the event arrested them. Meanwhile, 80 punk rockers attracted by music were sitting on the wall nearby, listening to my message. No doubt the protesters were sincere in their beliefs about rock music, but they failed to see that their preference about music was not on the same level as the truth as biblical absolutes. No one has yet shown me a scripture that explicitly condemns rock music. I believe that going to prevent them from having any effective outreach with, whenever this copied, it didn't copyright. I believe that this is going to prevent them from having any effective outreach with unbelievers. This not only affects how we go about evangelizing, but what and how we preach and teach. When preaching or answering questions on Saturday night, I periodically make a distinction. What someone believes about Christ and the nature of salvation is far more important than what they believe, let's say, about women's ordination. I lose respect with outsiders if I were to treat both of those topics with the same authority. I actually try to distinguish between 3 types of truth: absolute truths that are essential to the faith, truths that never change, and convictions that are non-essential to the truths and truths over which Orthodox Christians may differ. Preferences are traditions or customs like music tastes that may be compatible with the Bible but aren't basically biased or based, are not biblically based, and they may change with the culture and over time. Naturally, sometimes people differ with which category and subject, which one they belong to. So, I think that's a good illustration and how much it can. I liked his statement that it says, you lose your influence about Christ, you lose your credibility whenever you treat all things as equal, whenever you push something that is non-essential to the degree that you don't have any room left to push Christ. Whenever you're speaking so loudly about these things, there's no way to speak loudly about Christ. Look at this. I'm sure you've heard many of these proverbs and statements of wisdom about keeping quiet. And think about this in the sense of what we're talking about here today with essentials and non-essentials. Not keeping quiet in the sense of you just don't ever talk. Not keeping quiet in the sense that you have a reserved personality. But keeping quiet, not pushing your opinion all the time on everything. Being so abrasive about things and being so strong-willed and having to have your way about everything that you have to speak up on every matter and tell people what's right on every matter. Proverbs 10:19 says, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is wise. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. The fool gives full vent to his spirit, but the wise man quietly holds it back. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. Do you see a man who is hasty with his words? There's more hope for a fool than for him. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. There's a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to keep silent, and a time to speak. It's not always the time to speak. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Why is this? I mean, it's not just telling us to keep quiet, to have a reserved personality. I mean, there's people out there with just very bubbly personalities that are just fun and they talk all the time. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about whenever you voice your opinion, be careful about that. Be careful about when it is that you pull out your ammunition and your guns and you load them up and fire. If you're doing it at every turn, nothing's going to matter. You're going to be a fool. Not only are you going to be a fool because you're wrong on stuff, but you're going to be a fool because nobody's going to listen to you. You're just thought of as that person who knows he's a know-it-all. He talks about everything. I tell you, know this, my brothers and sisters. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Matthew 12 says, I tell you, on that day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word that they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Again, it's not careless words as if you're mumbling or, you're just having a casual conversation, and it's not that careful, and you're not real, you're not articulating, what you're going to put on your ham sandwich. That's not it. It's careless words in the sense of spoken because you're speaking without thinking, you're speaking without knowledge, you're speaking without this kind of paradigm and understanding when it is important to speak. The less you speak, the more important it will be when you do speak. The less you give your opinion, whenever you finally do speak up, people are going to quiet down and listen to you because you're reserved. You know when to speak up. And whenever you're talking about this, again, I'm not saying you can't talk about other theological issues and voice your opinion, but this is injecting yourself and injecting your passion and making a dividing line. And whenever you make your voice known and you divide every single place that you're at, you'll never have anybody that'll be able to cross over to you. That's what this is talking about, this reservation of our lips. Okay, briefly, let's talk about terminology that we use in this area, and then we'll end by giving some examples on the of this terminology, these circles that we use. There's a lot of different ways that we talk about essentials and non-essentials. Of course, there's essentials and non-essentials. That's one way to talk about it. But here's some of the ways that I have seen in theological literature, the ways in which people will divide what we are trying to distinguish between essentials and non-essentials. Dogma, doctrine, and opinion. That's a popular one. Dogma and doctrine. In the Catholic Church, you've got the dogma, which is the stuff that the church has spoken on, and like papal infallibility type things, papal ex cathedra statements. Those are dogma. The ecumenical councils are dogma, and then there's doctrine. Doctrine is not infallible. So as you can see here, they even got their distinctions, but I think we can use that as well, and Protestants have used that, dogma and doctrine. Dogma, doctrine, opinion, cardinal doctrines and peripheral beliefs. Whenever you're talking about it in the reverse, you've got heresy and heterodoxy. Heresy would be to deny one of the most central items, the things that are essential for salvation, and heterodoxy would be to deny one of those things that's very, very important, but not necessarily essential for salvation. Sometimes thought of as heresy, damns your soul. Heterodoxy does not damn your soul. The great tradition, notice here you've got tradition, tradition. You've got the great tradition, capital T tradition, and lower T tradition. That's sometimes the way people will put it. Roger Olson puts it as the great tradition being the most important, and then tradition being less important. And then he also would have heterodoxy and heresy. I don't know why I put that there twice. Need to get rid of that. Fundamentals and non-fundamentals. You've got the book series in the 1920s called The Fundamentals. You got fundamentalists, and then there's non-fundamentals. Primary doctrines, secondary doctrines, tertiary doctrines. That's first, second, and third. The core doctrines and peripheral teachings. Non-negotiable and indifferent matters, adiaphoria, things indifferent. The salvific issues and non-salvific issues, sometimes they might put it. Primary beliefs, secondary beliefs. Theological triage. If you've ever heard of medical triage, that's the way you divide people whenever they are sent to the hospital. This person is absolutely essential that the doctors see him right now. They are in critical condition. This person can be seen next, and then this person doesn't need to be seen till much, much later or something like. They divide it. That's called medical triage. They've done this in the military. I mean, that's the way that you can do this in doctrine as well. It's just there's not really a great way to divide it that way, but it's just kind of a concept. Theological triage is what we're talking about, or as I've learned it from James Sawyer, is doctrinal hierarchy. And then the things of first importance, and then the things of secondary importance. All these are ways to put it. I hope you're writing down your questions. If you have any questions, because like I said, I don't have the ability to answer those until after class. So here's the way you put it, maybe in the center, heresy, and then heterodoxy, and then who caresy. I coined that term, and it'll never be used, and I don't think it should ever be used. It's terrible. But I didn't know what to put. It was like, who cares? Okay, then you've got dogma and doctrine. You've got tradition. A tenet and toleration. There's one to put it as in all T's. A tenet is just something that's held to. Tradition is something that's important. Tenet is just something, this is the way we've always done it. And then toleration is just we tolerate whatever type thing. Primary, secondary, tertiary. And then you got salvation issues or fellowship issues. That's sometimes the way you divide it, but as we'll see in just a minute, it's a difficult way to put it because, I mean, I think that's okay, but you'll see in just a moment. Then you got generous orthodoxy. That's the way that some people have developed. The original term generous orthodoxy was by Hans Free, but Brian McLaren kind of took that over and made it kind of, let's just take all doctrine and just try to meet in the middle, kind of take what's called a Hegelian dialectal approach and say, well, let's take this extreme, and say that the true answer is somewhere in the middle and just be generous about wherever everybody goes. People have dealt with it, generous orthodoxy. And then you also have this way to look at it. And I think this is an important way to look at it, and we're going to continue to develop this as we go through the class because, I mean, I know you're asking it, and it's an important thing to ask. What is the difference whenever you're talking about this with regard to belief and with regard to practice? You've got on this side, the left-hand one that is devoted to belief or doctrine that is essential for salvation. And then you've got over here on the right-hand side called practice, which is those things that are essential for Christian life or essential for sanctification. So you might divide it that way, but I would do if one of you were dividing it this way. I'm going to make an argument that you really need two concentric circles, and you don't want to mix these two up. Not because one is so much more important than the other, or one is so much more foundational than the other, but because they don't really belong in the same place. Because the way in which people develop in their sanctification varies so much compared to what one needs to believe as far as becoming saved, the center circle, and then what one people have always believed as far as the central Christian teachings. But we'll get more into that. I'm going to try to do my best to develop this. I've never done a really good. I hope by the end of this I will have this really worked out in my mind. I've got the left-hand portion worked out really in my mind quite a bit, but the right-hand side I've never been able to get a hold of and feel like I know how to present this now. It's something that eludes me, not because maybe it's not out there, but because it is just by its nature elusive and harder for us to fill out this chart. Even though, like I said, I wrote a book to where I said, here's the 5 things that a Christian must believe, or the most important things a Christian must believe, and then I put the 5 most important practices for a Christian. And I do think these hold up, but I don't think you can put it as far as what practices are essential for salvation. You see, once you go there, then you're getting away from the Protestant understanding of salvation by faith alone, because the practice or the act of faith in Christ is the only thing we have, and as I believe, this is a response to the new birth of the Holy Spirit, but that's not an issue right now we need to talk about. Finally, we have my chart here where I have it divided, and this is what we're going to build out. Those things that are essential for salvation. What I mean by this is those things that you have to have in order to be saved, kind of like a wedding ceremony. What things are essential for that wedding ceremony between you and Christ? What are those things that are essential for salvation? And then as we go out, you've got essential for traditional orthodoxy, which is Christian tradition in general, what have all Christians of all times believed to be essential, and they've always believed it. Then what is essential for denominational orthodoxy, and then what is essential for, or important but not essential, not important, and then pure speculation. I'm open to changing the last two, maybe even combining them, not important and pure speculation. Sometimes I go back and forth about that. But this is what we're going to build out and give illustrations on during this class, and I hope it's going to be helpful for you. What we're trying to do is get down to the sine qua non of salvation, the sine qua non of doctrine, without which not. What are the most important things, and then we can build out from there. Okay, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube later on, not live, we do have a live discussion that happens afterwards for those who are patrons. If you want to become a patron, just go to patreon.com/C Michael Patton, and you can become a patron. Any level of patron is able to become or come to these classes and these discussions, and I'd love to have you. But that is what we're going to be turning to now.